and welcome back to this tutorial series where we go over the various settings within the Fantasy Grounds Unity application. In this video, we are going to cover the Basic tab of the Fantasy Grounds Updater utility that we launched earlier. And the first thing that I want to look at is the slider near the top of the configuration screen. This slider is used to scale the size of the fonts as well as all of the window elements once within Fantasy Grounds itself, and by default it is at 100%. It will allow you the means to increase the visibility of various details so that you can see them better. And when you think about it, you're going to be staring at the contents of this application for a reasonably long period of time. So increasing the size may reduce eye strain and make it a little bit more comfortable for you. The unit of measure it uses is a percentage value, so 100% would represent the normal scale of the font, whereas 125% will increase the font by an additional 25% over top of the normal scale, whereas 90% will reduce it by 10%. Generally, when I am recording, I like to have this at 125% because it allows for you, the viewer, to be able to read the contents of the screen. This is not the equivalent of changing the screen resolution. Say, for example, you may have your screen set to 1920 by 1080. As Fantasy Grounds Unity will use your desktop settings to determine what resolution it will use while running, regardless of if you're using Fantasy Grounds Unity in full screen or in window mode. This means you have to configure your default screen resolution from the operating system, be it Linux, Mac, or Windows, before launching Fantasy Grounds if you want to increase or decrease that screen resolution. The next portion of the screen I want to cover is the username and password entry boxes, as this is a section that can get a little confusing, and I want to hopefully clear that up a little bit. Before adding your license key, you should deal with the account portion first. This is because the license key is assigned to your account. And the way that Fantasy Grounds Unity will authenticate the license key is through the validity check that requests validation through their licensing servers that links directly to your account. This differs in relation to the old Fantasy Grounds Classic version, as with that version, you used to be able to run the demo version without having a Fantasy Grounds account. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case. If you have purchased Fantasy Grounds Unity through Steam or through some other app portal, there's a very good chance that you don't yet have a Fantasy Grounds account. Luckily for you, there's a link right here on this screen that will allow you to do just that. So if you have not yet created an account, please pause this video long enough for you to go through that process and then resume the video when you're ready. Once your account has been created and verified, you should be able to use those credentials in these fields to log in and allow the license validation process to function, as well as allow the updater services to check on any outstanding updates, but I'll cover that part in a moment. As I have already entered credentials, I don't need to do so again, but there's one thing I want to point out about the password field. If you've already got credentials stored, like I do, although you can't see them because I have them blocked out, and you are simply reloading the settings screen again, when you click on the login button, there is a good chance that your account will not authenticate appropriately. I'm not entirely sure why that happens, but I suspect once you authenticate for the first time, your credentials are obfuscated or hashed and then stored on your local computer. The contents of the text field are then updated to use star characters, which you will see in the password field. And thus, when you hit that login button again, it will attempt to use those star characters, not your password, as your actual password, hence why you will get an authentication failure warning. If you did click on the login button and it reported an invalid username or password, I highly recommend you re-enter in the proper credentials, as it has the potential to block your system from getting any future updates, and or download any new modules that you may have purchased if the authentication fails. The final point I want to make about the username and password entry boxes is why you need to authenticate in the first place, and there are several reasons. The first is based entirely on the type of license key you are using. For example, if you're using a subscription rather than a perpetual license, then Fantasy Grounds Unity needs to be able to authenticate to verify that you are continuing that subscription, and if not, it will invalidate your license key. The next is that each time you start Fantasy Grounds Unity, and for the previously stated reason dependent on your license type, it will validate that license key, ensuring you are running a licensed version of Fantasy Grounds Unity as opposed to the demo version, for example. And the final reason is that by authenticating, you're allowing Fantasy Grounds Unity to check your Fantasy Grounds store purchase history, so that it can determine if you've purchased new core rules, supplements, modules, or even token, map, or portrait packs that it will need to download, and indicate that by highlighting the Check for Updates button in the main launcher screen. For those who purchase their modules through Steam or Piazzo, I'll cover how those get linked into your purchase profile in a video where we cover the Account tab, as it's where it's specifically set up. The next portion of the screen that I want to cover is the license key entry box. If this is the first time that you are running Fantasy Grounds Unity, there's a good chance that this is going to be blank, meaning that it will consider itself a free or demo version of Fantasy Grounds. If you purchased Fantasy Grounds Unity and have either the standard or ultimate license keys, or are even using subscriptions, this is where you're going to enter that key. I already have a license key in there, but you can't see that as I have this portion of the screen blacked out in my recording software to prevent me from accidentally exposing it in a video. But it's also why you see a valid ultimate license response when my license entry box looks empty. If at some point in the past you have already added a license key or are changing a standard license key out for an ultimate license key, and you see a red response just below where I have valid ultimate license, it usually means it could not connect to the authorization service, thus it could not validate the license. This is normal and it is safe. You can safely close out the updater utility and you'll still be able to make use of Fantasy Grounds as if you have your license. Where it becomes a problem is if you've re-entered the license key or you simply even click into the text field where the license key is, it's going to have stars, and it's going to use those stars as an attempt to authorize Fantasy Grounds Unity again. You're going to want to ensure that you paste in a valid license if you even accidentally enter that text box, because otherwise you will invalidate your license. You can safely re-enter in your license key even if you've used it prior, because all it's going to do is verify that that key is linked to your account. So if you have to, you can do it multiple times. As soon as you have finished entering your license key, it will attempt to validate that key, at which point you should see a response similar to mine, but it's going to be specific to the license that you purchased. When you return to the screen at a later date, that field will be filled with star characters, so do not enter that text field. As I've already stated, it will invalidate your license key when the text field loses focus. Now, the last thing that I want to go over is around some troubleshooting related things specific to your license key itself. There have been instances where it has taken quite some time to get a valid license key emailed out to you, or find it in the Fantasy Grounds store, or even have it show up on the Steam system. Back in 2017, when I first purchased Fantasy Grounds Classic, the Ultimate Edition, I never received an email containing my license key, and this confused me, so I want to hopefully remove some of that confusion for anyone else who may be running into the same problem. There are two locations that you will want to go, and the first is if you purchased Fantasy Grounds Unity through Steam, be it the Standard or the Ultimate Edition, you're going to want to look at the CD key menu for that application once you've got it installed. Although there is a chance that that could still be blank, and that is because SmiteWorks uploads license keys in batches. Because of that, it's possible that they've sold through all of the license keys that they have uploaded previously to Steam. If after about a 24-hour period you still do not see a license key showing up in that CD key field, I recommend that you contact Fantasy Grounds support, as that will prod them to get a new key uploaded. They may also send it to you directly and then deal with uploading a new batch of license keys for Steam at a later point in time. When we go and cover the account tab in that particular video, some additional aspects of the license will be explained, so I'm going to hold off covering anything around that until I get to that particular video. However, if you went through the Fantasy Grounds store and purchased Fantasy Grounds' license through that, then you should be able to find that within your account details, specifically your order history, in order to be able to actually access that license key. And I think there's a bit of a quicker rate of return there, simply because they only deal with Steam in a batch processing method. However, with that, let's move on to the next video in the series.